um, a more hands-on type meetup where everybody's working on something. We're still discussing the format on that, and Tony started like a little suggestions thing on GitHub where we've been discussing. What? I'm just gonna make emails for Outlook.
We need a main website where we can disseminate all the links.
Yeah, it's a lot easy.
Just one like no CSS, just HTML. Straight.
Just plain text is all you need. That's the best way to say.
I remember when that was
All right.
the thing.
And you're recording? Nice. So
Yeah.
I can
Yeah,
get
it's
this
being
a bit later.
recorded as well.
That's perfect. I feel bad.
I thought you liked having your name in the URL of the gear.
I hate that.
Take it away.
All right, so I'm Randy Bone. I work at a defense
Yeah,
contractor
thanks.
in Nashua. Thanks, John. Jacobs Technology, and one of my
Someone help Tony move chairs at the end of the night.
All right.
You guys go. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, John.
Okay, so I'm primarily a software developer as opposed to most of the folks that are the Scrum experts who are usually program managers, stuff like that. So I have a much more hands-on perspective. One of the things we'll do here, instead of boring you with slides, is I thought we'd actually go through a project. And so the idea is we're going to do about 20 weeks worth of work in maybe 20, 30 minutes. So bear with me here a little bit. One of the first things I like to say is that Scrum is a very powerful thing. And so because of that, sometimes people become really passionate about it. One legitimate point of view does not necessarily negate another. So as I'm going through things, try to appreciate that whole kind of thing. There's different points of view, and we're here to exchange ideas and learn from each other, hopefully. So all of that said, how many folks here have been on a project where they actually did Scrum every day? Okay, so that's what I thought was going to kind of happen. Basically, I thought we'd get somebody that was very experienced and then maybe other people who aren't experienced. And rather than just throw definitions at you as PowerPoint slides, I thought we'd go through this project. So the project that I'm suggesting is there's a real life thing called Humanitarian Toolbox, and you can Google that. And what they do is they are a volunteer effort, but they do software that coordinates things for relief agencies. What they've had is there's a hurricane someplace and everybody loses their houses, and so one aid agency will show up with bottled water, and the next aid agency will show up with bottled water, thinking the other guy brought blankets. And so
It's like a potluck. Everybody brings dessert.
Yeah, exactly. And so it turns out there's agencies around the world that they're so big they actually have their own jet aircraft. They have C-130s, things like that. So anyway, what I was going to suggest was that we use that as a model for our project. So instead of being Humanitarian Toolbox, we're going to be Haverhill Humanitarians. So if we're going to do this as a Scrum project, so we're doing the software development here, and we're actually pretty close to a perfect size. Scrum teams should be 5 to 9 people, so there's 6 of us here. So when you're doing something like this, the product owner is the person that's the liaison with the customer, and is the person that's responsible for the product backlog and the sprint backlog. So to get things started, here's some basic ideas about that, and I've decided the way the product owner decides what to work on first usually is by asking the customer what's the most important thing to work on, because the most important thing is the least likely to change. So that's a clue that your product owner is on the right thing. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
So anyway, so our product backlog, what we're doing is we're taking these ideas and we've broken them down into things for our sprint backlog. So, okay. So let's say that we're going to expand on the backgrounds of people. Okay, and we've come up with software tasks 1 through N. And so if we're going to do a sprint, okay, so it would start with a sprint planning meeting. Every day we'd have a daily stand-up. At the end of it, we'd have a sprint review where everybody on the team gets to show everybody else what they did. And then we'd have a retrospective where everybody on the team gets to say, this is what I think went right, this is what could have been done better, and we as a team are going to decide on things to improve upon. So let's say that we're going to do background. So now we have to do, I'm going to say we got to do criminal checks. We have to do, let's see, availability. And let's just focus on those 2 for now. So basically what I would do is the product owner is I would come to the sprint planning meeting. So now we're in a sprint planning meeting. And I would say to everybody, okay, let's play planning poker. So how many?
Estimation poker.
Another good way to put it. So
What did she say?
Estimation poker?
Okay.
Actually, I gotta interrupt you. Where's the release cycle definition, the sprint cycle length, and how many sprints in a release cycle? Are you skipping all that part?
No, that's an excellent question.
'Cause
Welcome.
that's and then you have the kickoff once you have your release.
Okay,
cycles, right?
well, okay, so I'm kind of trying to lead us down the road where we make some mistakes so we can learn from this. So that's
Oh,
good
sorry,
stuff.
I didn't.
No, no, those are great questions. I was hoping somebody would ask that. So basically, the guidelines put forth by the folks that do Scrum say that a sprint planning meeting should be somewhere between 1 and 4 weeks. So the question becomes, how do you decide what's right for you? Because some people will sit there and roll their eyes and say, 1 week is too short, 4 weeks is too long, so how do you decide? So the guideline for that is it should be long enough to accomplish something that's measurable and demonstratable, but no longer. The idea there is that you're time boxing things to keep things moving. So if you're on the type of project where everything's going to take a really long time, you probably want to stretch it out. The other thing people figure out pretty quickly is that if you want to take it easy on yourself, you also stretch it out. And so you want to be careful about making sure that you're not stretching it out so long that you're losing value in that. I've seen folks where they were adamant, we can't get anything done in under 3 weeks. And then the end of the 3rd week, they're all sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah, backlog stories for that. I always keep them on their toes.
Well, I'll bet you do. So anyway, so I'm going to say, okay, so let's say for the sake of argument, because now we're getting bigger. So now the team should be 5 to 9 people. So let's go ahead and say that I'm going to put criminal background checks. How long is it going to take to code up so that we've got something demonstratable? So in this context, this means a UI, the back-end thing that probably goes out to some police database and comes back and says, we ran this thing on this date and this person was fine. So how long do we think that's going to take? And so have people seen planning poker cards?
Yeah, well, I thought you used the, I always forget the number, the one
Okay,
that
so
doubles the
I'll-
numbers, the estimation poker cards.
Okay, so I'll pass these around and you can take a look at them. But basically in here, the way it works is there's actually 4 decks.
We just numbered them on cards. We didn't get that fancy.
Okay, and if you don't have the prepared cards, then you can do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically the idea here is that, so I would take and go like this. So you would take those, and you would take those, and you would take those.
Yeah, they run on the Fibonacci series. That's the name I was trying to remember.
Yeah, so she's exactly right. They run on the Fibonacci sequence.
Not to
So
pronounce it.
why do they use the Fibonacci sequence? Okay,
I don't know.
the reason for that is Fibonacci sequence is a numerical representation of the way things appear in nature, okay? And it makes it easier to do estimations because the best estimations are comparisons. And the way, you know, human beings do things over 1 million years of evolution is to compare things. If a police officer actually wants to ask you about somebody that they're interested in, they'll never ask you, how tall was that person? They'll say, was he taller than you or shorter than you? Because the ability of human beings to compare is far more accurate than the ability of human beings to put numbers on things.
Also, doesn't it go by nuts? Do you use that term anymore? Nebulous units of time?
Well, okay, so there's 2 schools of thought on that. Now, there's 2 founders, the 2 co-creators of Scrum, Schwaber and Sutherland.
Mm-hmm.
Sutherland doesn't believe in using numbers and all, and Schwaber does. So that's one of those cases where you have to actually figure out what works for you. So anyway, so the idea here is we have this criminal checks thing, and we have a bit of an idea. So the folks that actually have cards, can you actually pick out a card where you think it measures the level of effort for
Well, don't we ask questions of the product owner first? Like, okay, so does this exist, or are we extending an existing module somewhere?
Let me get to that. You're doing good though. You're keeping me on my toes. So now one of the things, now we would probably all be sitting at a conference table, but one of the things that you want to be careful about as far as getting the most value out of this is you don't want to anchor your results. So try not to let anybody else see the card you picked before you show it. Okay, so now if all of you have picked a card, and if you don't want to think about it, just pick any card. Well, let me know when you're ready. Ready?
Yep.
Ready?
Yep.
Yep.
Go.
Okay, show your cards. Okay, so we have a 2, a 55, a 34. Now, the thing of it is I was hoping this would come out, so you guys are doing great. Because what does this underscore? This underscores that we've just started our project, and we're all over the map. Normally what would happen is everybody would already be familiar with what's going on because you've been on the team. So if you're getting stuff that's like at completely opposite ends of the spectrum, that means the understandings of what's required to do this project is also at completely opposite ends of the spectrum. Now let's say we did this one, and then we did this one, and we did another one, and we're all over the map. We're not agreeing at all. It's not like Tony said 8 and I said 11. You know,
You don't pit them against each other to say, why did you pick high, why did you pick low?
well, the thing of it is when they're relatively close and you have confidence that most or all the people in the room can know what's going on by just asking a few questions, then you say, yay, you know, the whole team is on track. But when everybody's all over the road, and because we just defined this problem and nobody really has their arms around what's going on, at this point I would say, this is where you stop the sprint planning meeting because we're not ready for it. If we continue on and Tony says, well, gee, I don't know about this, I'm going to have to go do some homework and come back.
Well,
And
I'm sorry, I tend to disagree, because usually when you have a team, you already have like your database people, you have
Okay,
your
let me get there.
UI people.
Let me get there. Okay, so the idea here is the whole point of this talk is values and getting value. And what I see very frequently is that people will try to, even though they're not ready for this, they'll try to plow through this meeting. What's supposed to happen at this point, and the thing to get the best value, is to stop the meeting and say, okay, we recognize we're not ready for this. We're going to go to execute sprint 0, and this happens quite frequently in the beginning of a project. Okay, so sprint 0 isn't about having these kinds of meetings. It's actually about getting the team together and saying, okay, what don't we know and what do we need to know, so that everybody in the room has at least some idea, and that when we get to this point we can make meaningful things. One of the things that I'm leading up to with all of this, and the thing that I see all the time, is ideally Scrum teams should remain stable. So if we were the Scrum team, we would stay together for the entire project. And it never happens. So what happens is that the original team, They do the sprint zero so that they're ready, you know, for the first one of these. They're doing the daily stand-up so that when everybody gives a brief summary every day, everybody knows what's going on and they're just keeping up with the status. They're going through this so they know what's been completed. They know they're going through this so they're interacting and clicking as a team. Then the new guy comes on and nobody does anything for him to bring him up to speed. He's not productive and somebody will sit there and go, well, that guy's a lousy coder. He doesn't know anything. Don't do that to people. That's not respecting, folks. Okay, and it's also not coming up with openness and like that. These are the Scrum values. One of the things that kind of inspired this talk is I went to there's an event every year called Give Thanks for Scrum. It's held on the day before Thanksgiving. And they get Schwaber and Sutherland to show up and talk. Now these guys will get 15 grand for an afternoon of consulting or more. So the fact that you can go hear them for free, if you're interested in Scrum, it's really worth going to. A year and a half ago, Sutherland got up and he said to this, you know, Scrum event, and there's 100 people in the room. He said, how many people in here are Scrum Masters? And just about everybody raised their hand. And then he said, how many people know that there are Scrum values? And about half the people raised their hand. And he shook his head and he said, that's sad. But the thing of it is a lot of people don't get value out of Scrum because they're not holding true to the values. They're just trying to rotely go through the ceremonies. And you're just going through it for the sake of going through it. You're not bonding with people. What is Scrum? Scrum isn't, it's not a checklist. The relationship of Agile to Scrum is, Agile is a framework, and Scrum is a methodology that implements that framework. And Kanban is a methodology that implements that framework. And they're two different things. So knowing, and there's a bunch of other ones too. So understanding all of the fundamentals will really help you get value out of this. One of the big things about, well, anyway, I'm rattling on a little too much. So let's kind of finish going through this, and then we can kind of get back to some of the definitions. So we've gone through, we've executed our sprint zero, then we came back and went through our sprint backlog list, and now everybody's like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I didn't quite get this one detail, but Tony knew how to do that. So now we're all on board, we're on the same page. And so we've estimated each one of these things. So we ultimately decided that this was an 11, this was an 8, and we went down through and had enough things so that everybody can pull. Now these numbers, again, they're Fibonacci sequence numbers, they're relative for the purposes of comparison. There are some people that will argue that if you start estimating in hours, you're going down a bad path. It depends on what you're doing. If you're in a software spot where you can accurately estimate in hours, then and it works for you, that's fine, but most people aren't successful with that. So anyway, so now we've got this whole list. So now it's the end of the sprint planning meeting. So how do people get the work? And the answer to that is people on the team pull the work. So let's say you wanted to do the criminal background checks, and I was kind of thinking about it, but you say, hey, I'd really like to do that. I say, well, if you're already doing that, then I'll do availability, and he grabs something else.
Well, what if the story, which would be criminal checks, is broken down into a UI, a back end, and then there's two different expertises that have to also work with another team, but there's different parts of the story. Not everyone can work on a whole story unless it's a really small company.
Okay, now here's another place where the value is a really big deal. The hardest job in Scrum by far is the product owner job, because the idea is that when you get to here, you have something that is demonstratable as complete, and if you never touch it again in any way, shape, or form, it can ship with the final product. That's what you're going for. And if you don't have that, then most likely the problem is that the product owner wasn't able to break down the user story in such a way that you could do it
But
like that.
That's also within a release cycle with X number of sprints that starts off with a kickoff, that has the community values and all that stuff.
Okay, so.
That's all missing in the grooming sessions that occur before you get to the sprint planning session.
Okay, so she just said a ton of things, and it's all good stuff. I am going to mention one thing.
It's hard for me to start at the very end and then work to the high level, so.
Okay.
Yeah, you're already down at the,
Well,
where's the dot?
Well, okay, so the one thing that I absolutely forgot to do, and so shame on me, we started about 6:30?
Yep.
Okay, so I was told that I could have an hour for this, and I wanted to keep an eye on the time, so I throttle it, and then I make sure. The idea here was that we're going to go through this in an hour or less, and then I would stick around for the remainder of the time
Oh, you're
and
working
ask
backwards. Okay.
ask and let anybody ask any questions they want. So I wanted to fulfill my obligation. My obligation is what was advertised here. So we said we're going to go through the basics and then allow people to ask questions. Because we're starting at 6:30, we're going to end at 7:30 because our gracious and charming host said try to keep the presentation to an hour. And so everybody in the room should feel enabled and empowered to say to me, it's 7:30, you said we're going to stop, so when we will stop. If somebody wants to give me a 5-minute warning on this, that would be helpful. So anyway, so now everybody has pulled the work. One of the big things and a big place where you lose value here is if the Scrum Master just starts assigning work, that's considered really bad. Thank you. The reason that it's really bad is because one of the big things that folks get out of Scrum is, okay, so everybody gets something out of Scrum, and you'd never sell it unless everybody did get something. So developers get autonomy. They get to pick what they work on. They get to choose how much they're going to pull. And so that's a very empowering and motivating thing, and you don't want to shortchange them. And if the Scrum Master or anybody else is just walking up and say, you're doing this, okay, you've lost that. Okay, management, what they get out of Scrum is the work becomes more predictable, because these things are basically estimates here. And when we get to the end of the sprint, we're going to say, okay, we pulled 40 story points. How many did we actually accomplish? If we're accomplishing everything we set out to do, we're pretty perfect, and that's a good thing. A lot of times you get to the end and people will say, well, you know, I didn't realize there was X, Y, and Z involved with the criminal checks, and so now I'm not done with this. In that case, what you do is you say, okay, well, we originally thought it was 11, we got about half of it done. Take credit for any work that you can call complete, and then anything that's not complete, roll it into the product backlog, which should get pulled into the sprint backlog for the next round, and complete it there. So it's funny because now I'm getting these pensive nods of yes, so that makes me feel good. So anyway, we've completed this, we've pulled the work, and so now we do the daily stand-up. Now folks probably know the 3 things that you say in the daily stand-up. Okay, and this was amended a couple of years ago by Sutherland and Schwaber. It used to be what I do yesterday, what I do today, and anything that's in the way. Yesterday, today, and what's in the way. They amended that because they found, and I was on a team where a guy would do this. He'd either say, I did something that was completely unrelated to this team, lack of focus, or he'd say, I don't remember what I did yesterday. And I wanted to say to the guy, well, why don't you quit drinking during the week? So anyway, what you're supposed to do is say what I do yesterday for the team, what I do today for the team, and what blocking issues do I have, if any. So I would actually say, I pulled availability here, and so I'm going to say, well, today I completed the UI. I'm halfway through. Today I'm going to work on the back end side of it, and I have to check with Tony because I may have an issue, and I'll check with him. because I've announced that I may have an issue with the back end stuff with him, if anybody else on the team is interested in that, then when I follow him out into the hallway and say, hey, Tony, let's talk about this for 5 minutes, you can join. Anybody who's not interested in that, they can just kind of go back to work. This is one of the things that keeps things agile and makes it valuable. The train wreck in the daily stand-up is when I actually stop the daily stand-up and say, well, yesterday I worked on the UI, today I've got a problem with the back end. Tony, let me ask you now, and let me force all these nice people to wait and twiddle their thumbs and do absolutely nothing. Okay, so that's the distinction between a good daily stand-up and a not so good
Is it
one.
still geared at 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Depending, I guess, on the size of the team.
Well, it's funny because the guidelines say 15 minutes. My personal experience is if they go longer than 5 minutes, you're probably doing something wrong. And I have heard of them going 45 minutes. And the team that was going 45 minutes, they dropped Scrum after a week.
Yeah.
So, because, do you guys in the back really care if I start talking to Tony about the back end issue and then I start telling him about my car problems? So, probably not. So, we go through this every day, yesterday, today, and what's in the way. Now we get to the end. Now, the thing that is this is the meeting that gets hijacked the most, in my opinion, or at least in my experience. Okay, so what is this meeting for? It's not for the customers, it's for the team. The thing of it is you will find adult people who will actually be giddy because not only are they really proud of what they've done, but they're actually thrilled that they can explain it to somebody that gets it. And I have seen, people just say, I've got the UI done, I've got the back end done, I've got the unit test done, I've got the integration documentation done, everything. And then the product owner, who lacked a little experience, said, well, what do the stakeholders think? And the stakeholder is sitting in the back or sitting on the phone, and well, that's exactly right.
Only at the release cycle, not at the sprint cycle end.
Well, the thing of it is so she's exactly right. So what's the problem with this? Okay,
They
so
don't get it.
well, no. Okay, so I want to say that you four guys, the gentleman on my left, you're the CEO. You two guys are the customers, and you are the subject matter expert and a renowned figure in your field. Oh, and thank you for coming, in your busy schedule. So basically, what happens is they invite these people, and the Scrum Master, who is responsible for two things: guarding the boundary of the Scrum team and enforcing the rules of Scrum. Okay. They've never talked to you guys, and for all we know, you have no training in Scrum. And I've seen this happen where you actually come and say, well, I'm on the phone and I can't really see it, so I can't say this is okay until I look at it. Could you send me the code? Okay, so what's just happened? You didn't know that you were ripping the feet right out from underneath the developer who thought he was done because he followed the rules of Scrum, and you just told him he's not done until you tell him he's done. So that's a place where you can really lose value. So the point of this is that Scrum prescribes, as she was alluding to, that you can invite stakeholders to the sprint planning meeting and to the sprint review, not to this. You can invite them, but only on the condition they don't speak. And the big problem with doing this is that the CEOs, the subject matter experts, and especially the customers, what do you think is going to happen if I say, you're the customer and you can't talk?
But at Sprint Zero, all you've done is set up servers, if you get that bug. So there's nothing to show anyway to a customer.
Well,
Customers
what
are
they always
wonderful.
want to know is what is their favorite feature that's
Yeah.
well down the
Yeah.
backlog. Well, what about this? Or what
That's
about
the
this
product
edge
owner
case?
to manage expectations.
And that's a constant thing. But what I found is educating this whole line of people on
Yes.
what the team is doing is a key piece to making everybody happy and showing them the value of knowing predictably what they're going to get.
Absolutely.
And that, once they know that, then they stop asking those questions. And it gets a lot better for everybody.
Well, that's exactly right. And the thing of it is now this whole thing is a judgment call on the part of the Scrum Master and the product owner, because if you can successfully educate them, if they will respect that boundary, okay, respect, then, invite them to be silent observers. If they're military people, don't ask me why I say that, I work for a defense contractor, and they're going to ignore the rules no matter what you say, then it's the product owner's responsibility to have the meeting where they review this stuff with them, but don't sit there and rip the legs out from underneath the team. You will actually have a measurable decrease in performance from your team members.
Do you really have stakeholders after one sprint show up at yours? I mean, I discourage that totally. And then
Well,
not till the end of the release cycle is usually what the company would agree to. And you're Raytheon, right? You used to be
Well,
customer Kronos.
Well, the thing of it is for every single team will have a unique situation.
Well, no, not if the company launches and they're all on the same page. That's another question.
Well, that's actually a really important part of this, because
Culture.
culture, exactly right. And the thing of it is so what do you have as a corporate culture? Is Scrum a checkbox, which it might be for your contract? Or is it something that's embraced from everybody from the top executive in the building down to the bottom person? And if it's embraced top to bottom, then you're going to do a lot better than if you just have teams implementing it because they think of it as a checkbox in a contract. And so that's a big place to recognize that there's a potential loss in value.
I think having come from a situation with a company that started up with Scrum 2 years ago, the challenge for most companies is that they don't say, oh, there's this new thing, Scrum, we're going to have 200 developers form 50 teams and try it out. It's a pilot project, or the crazy group on the third floor that does it, and so it is hard to get people to understand around the company what's going on.
Kronos went 100% in back in 2005, and the hardest people to train were C-level, because they're used to, step after step, and not just waiting 6 weeks to see something, and not knowing when things are going to be done undone. And it was harder for upper management than anybody else in the company, and they went 100% in whole hog. Every team was Agile Scrum.
I was actually very lucky, because over the past few years I've actually gotten invited to some open houses where companies that embrace Scrum. And the thing that I found interesting, and I would sit right up front and I would raise my hand and ask the question, okay, you've got 100 people here, you've got 60 people here. Out of that entire group, did you have anybody that just flat out was dead set against it? And every single one of them said yes. And I said, okay, how'd you handle that? And they said some people, they were just able to kind of encourage them. They said, my personal favorite was a company in Connecticut that actually did software for CNC milling machines, which was kind of cool because, they do demos of this stuff and you could sit there and shape metal like it was nothing. But anyway, they said they had two guys that just flat out refused to do it. They wouldn't stop saying, this is stupid, I'm not doing it, it's, And they finally pulled these guys in and they said, look, you either need to get on board with this or you need to find another job. And at that point, they thought Scrum was great.
Your paycheck depends on it.
So, the thing of it is you want people to opt into Scrum. You don't want people doing Scrum at the point of the gun. But the thing of it is you got to have people on board, and the people that sit there and just announce loudly, this is stupid, I'm not doing it, they're not your biggest threat. The people that decide that they're going to undermine it as quietly as possible, they are the biggest threat. And if you have one determined person and nobody catches it, you will undermine it, and it'll end up going out the window, and I've seen that happen. And the last guy that told me that and he was very proud of himself, he undermined it for his entire organization. It was a big organization. And I said to him, well, why did you do that? You know, because there's a potential to get value out of this. And he said, I've been managing people for 20 years, and I will be damned if anybody's going to tell me how to do things.
Yeah, but you gotta let go of, they're self-managed, the
Well,
teams. And that concept scares, I mean, Kronos bought into it. They brought Cutter in, they trained for 2 years, they were there on the premise the entire time. The hardest people to bring in were the portfolio planning people, because they still wanted to do waterfall, but everybody else did Agile Scrum.
Yes.
And that doesn't flow.
Well, the thing of it
Until
is,
the third year, then it all clicked.
well, it's funny because your best defense against it, and again, the whole talk is about trying to get value out of this, is to make sure that the openness thing is out there. Because if you can shine the light of day, not in a mean way, but just in a matter-of-fact sort of way, on the people that are undermining things, a lot of times the problem just becomes self-correcting and it doesn't end up in human resources, which that's the ultimate, you know, going for the nuclear option is the last resort. You're trying to get the best out of people, not just, you know, use this as, if you're ever using Scrum as a weapon, you're not doing Scrum.
It's like trusting your spouse. For C-level people, you know, for some people, they never trust them, right?
So it's like, you almost have to convince people that there's a different kind of motivation
Yes.
involved, right? So there's this book by Dan Pink, he wrote Whole New Mind, very good book. He wrote one called Drive.
Okay.
He's worth looking at. Drive, he talks about 3 levels of motivation. Motivation 1.0 is biological, kind of bang someone on the head and drag them off. Motivation 2.0, carrot and stick, wages, profits, heaven, hell. Motivation 3.0 is intrinsic motivation, and he ties that to what's happening with the open source movement, people, you know, doing volunteer work because they want to achieve status, they want to have basically status in a community. So it seems like this comes out of this model where you trust people, you invite them in.
Well, what's really missing, which is the biggest part of Agile Scrum, is the kickoff, where you get the team together for the first time. The product owner goes up and describes what you're going to attain. You tell, it's already been decided how many release cycles, and the headlines or the chapters of the stories, the big ones have been decided upon. You've already had the architects look at it, so you have a nebulous idea of whether it's bigger than a bread box. And then you get together and you create your community values, and everybody contributes. So what are your core hours? Well, 10 to 3, no meetings before 10, no meetings after 3. And then how do we talk to each other? How do we evaluate things? What's the definition of done, done, done?
The 4
That's-
definitions of done.
Oh, is
yes.
it 4 now?
Yes. Oh, okay.
I've been out for 3 years, so
Oh,
I've been doing
okay.
my own Agile Scrum on other projects.
Okay, how many people know the 4 definitions of done or have heard that expression? Because it's not actually a...
We had 3. Well, the
Okay,
company
so-
has to define what done, done, done means.
Okay.
Depending on the well, our company
So,
was 3
so,
levels.
so done is the developer has completed the unit tests and done any testing they want to do. Done is where your own company's QA has said it's okay. Done is the customer has accepted it through their testing. And done is where it's in production with the customer with no outstanding issues.
Oh, no, that's our release, because, okay, it depends on the type of software you work on. So we had release cycles once a year, so done would be, everybody's done.
Yes.
But you're right, the other ones, and the customer changes depending on the end of the sprint or the release cycle, who the customer is, because the product owner is your customer. At Kronos was during the sprint, and at the release cycle, you brought in the owners, the stakeholders, to view what was completed in that release.
That's a
period.
very different circumstance than the continuous releasing that we're doing to a cloud platform.
Well, we still
Where,
have.
where it's,
Yeah.
there's it's just,
We call that the bug fixing group.
well, we do, our product goes out that way
Yeah.
constantly, so it's,
Oh, that's right,
it's,
yeah.
it's releases every 2-3 days.
Yeah, and we have point releases every 3 months that
Yeah.
have major fixes that go in from the major release.
Yeah, there's no, in our pipeline, there's no software that's waiting in
You
any
have
state
a
other
permanent
than.
backlog.
Yes.
Yes,
That's where you work.
So there's nothing held back, it all goes
Yeah.
straight out, there's no branching,
And just to,
nothing like that.
and just to speak to what you're saying, Sutherland was actually talking in November about why not do releases every 2 or 3 hours, direct to production.
Yeah,
Wow.
we're starting to promote story by story.
Now, if you're a big software, how do you know what's not gonna be touched or touched? How can you miss that
It-
fast?
It has to be toggled in configuration or feature
Oh,
toggles
Okay.
that you
On or
set,
off?
yes.
Yeah.
What about
That if-
fixes?
But mostly it's available, it has to be designed to be available as finished software from the time.
Well, that
of
makes
the-
Yeah, let me-
And bug fixes go into the same, as soon as you fix the bug, that story goes out.
What about refactoring?
Yeah, let me finish this and then we'll
Oh,
get
sorry.
into the questions. So,
It's interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
It goes on different. many
So
different
anyway,
levels.
so now we've done the sprint review where we've shown each other what we've done and we feel really good about it. Now there's the sprint retrospective. Never let anybody into this. The rule of thumb on this is never let anybody into this unless you incredibly trust them, okay? And that's gotta be your team. So one of the big things is
Stays in the family.
it's gotta stay in the family, that's exactly right. So one of the big things that can really mitigate some tough feelings, especially since, Tony did something that Tony didn't like, and then the back row that's on the team, not the executives, they kind of had mixed feelings, and people can become very passionate about this. And it's very important to kind of set a tone where, we're not going to implement everything, we're going to agree on what we implement. And one of the big things that can mitigate hard feelings is to serve food in this, like right in the middle of it. Start the meeting, get things going, get people talking, and then bring in the pizza. So, you're gonna decide on stuff that you're gonna have to live with. One of the big things about this is, you need to know too that if you bring in something new, Tony won the argument, I'm sorry. But everybody agreed to that and everybody accepted it. So we tried this and for reasons that none of us had any way to anticipate, the idea actually wasn't that good after all. So we all know that we can make adjustments to that we can drop ideas that didn't work out so well, but we're going to be in all of this together. We're going to eat together. We're going to do whatever's needed.
Do you still do it anonymously with the plus and minus with the Post-its?
That's no, actually, it's up to the team on how they want to do that
And then the
kind of
Scrum
stuff.
Master reads it out and doesn't pick out who it is that said anything.
Well, one of the big problems with that, and these things evolve and they swing back and
Yeah.
forth and all the rest of it, but one of the big problems with that is if Tony's already been talking about it for a week, we know it's his idea. So, and the other thing is that the anonymity is to kind of protect people, and we want to be bonded close enough in this room that we trust that even though I disagreed passionately, at the end of the day, I'm going to respect, what the team decides on and work within the team.
There's only one issue with that. I used to have I had bigger teams of 5 or 6, right? So, and sometimes you get cultures that don't speak out. And when you only have, like me, I'm a big mouth, right? So, anyway, sorry, but the people that don't speak out, the Post-it notes allow them to speak without saying who it was that said it. And it doesn't have to be about a certain thing.
Okay, so I've gotten that comment in the past, and the thing of it is you need to kind of keep an eye on the cultural stuff to empower those kinds of folks. And so if you're the Scrum Master and you're noticing that the fellow in the back isn't saying a heck of a lot, go talk to him. Make sure that he feels
Doesn't always
comfortable.
work.
What's that?
Doesn't always work.
The thing of it is different. Okay, so let's say, I remind him of the guy that did something awful to him. The thing of it is he might be a great software developer and a great guy, but he might not be clicking with this team. So you're not going to kick him off in the middle of the project over that. But when the project ends, the teams will reform. And you try to, good Scrum Masters will actually get together and kind of talk about those things and try to make things fit. Okay, because the thing of it is He's a great resource, he's a great asset, and we try to leverage that in a positive way. We try to have loyalty to our employees and all the rest of it. And the thing of it is everybody in the room is going to see this. If we just say, you know, he wears blue every day and nobody else does, and that makes him some sort of outcast, you know, if everybody sees that we take care of our own as opposed to we just can't be bothered, to hell with them, get rid of them, you know, the thing of it is you're inspiring loyalty, and that gets into the whole thing about culture. Culture is a big part of Scrum because you need to feel comfortable and confident with the people that you're working with. And if the Scrum Master is not guarding the boundaries of the team and making sure that you're never getting in a situation like some SME comes to this and pulls the rug out from underneath you, then, you know, those are the nuances of Scrum that really lend value.
The retrospective is absolutely my favorite part of the whole process. I think it you know, if you use it really rigorously and you follow through and you look at the next sprint, how did I do on the things that I came out of the retrospective that I was going to address and all that, and you follow that, that's a thing that really helps to get buy-in from people who are new to it. Once they start to see that things are actually improving, because in the real world before this, so many things just were always there and you always accepted them, and that's just the way it is. And this, you actually can see continuous improvement building.
Yeah, that's a continuous improvement.
But one of the things that I found, you know, with the cultural thing, I have teams offshore, and coming up with different ways to do the retrospective. Creative ways, you know, like to get people to feel comfortable about saying negative things or things that might be perceived one way or another. One cool way to do it was to take pictures from different movies of all different genres, and, you know, get about 25 of them on a tabletop or on a screen and say, pick the movie that you think described this last sprint.
Oh.
And then, you know, they pick Groundhog's Day or you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre or whatever. You know, it's an icebreaker. It makes people comfortable to start talking about maybe some of the more uncomfortable things that happened. You know, and there's a million different techniques and ways to approach the stand-up, the retrospective. My favorite is really plain vanilla, but sometimes you have to break it up.
And it's different if you have teams that are not on site. It's very hard, even for the stand.
I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the book that you mentioned.
Drive.
Dan Pink.
Dan Pink. DanPink.com.
What a cool name.
But he's interesting. His book, A Whole New Mind, says that right brainers are going to rule the 21st century. So he claims that the creative.
All right, go lefties.
Which is which again? Right is creative and left
The
is
right,
analytical?
yeah, well, that's, you know, the breakdown supposedly, but he claims and he looks at how a lot of left brain work, quote unquote, gets outsourced, and the right brain work is creative work. And he looks at the different aspects of that kind of work, so he's interesting.
Well, I was glad that you mentioned what you did before, because this is pretty much the process, and kind of it's discussions, I think, from here more or less, unless people have questions about the process.
But how familiar is everybody with Scrum and Agile? I kind of like.
Well,
What'd you say?
How familiar is everybody? I mean, you're all
I had no
developers,
idea.
right?
Yeah,
I'm a teacher.
the most I did for Agile was stand-ups and then the review at the end.
You never did grooming? You were never part of a grooming session?
No, they never really called it to be authentic Scrum or
Yeah.
Agile. It was
Very
more
few
of a-
companies implement it properly, from what I understand.
my company-
Yeah, they called
Didn't
it
even pretend
like an
to.
Agile-like
Yeah.
environment. You know,
That just
Agile.
means
with
code
the-
it fast, get it
I
out.
had a couple of years with, you know, Agile-like teams, and I really didn't get much out of it, but when we went all in on it, then it got a whole lot better.
well, that's exactly it. You know, the thing of it is if you're
Effort,
just doing
yeah.
a couple of little parts here and there, you're incurring the overhead of doing it, but you're not getting that much value out of it. And I've actually seen teams where they were just doing this and doing it badly, and then they were doing this and not inviting half the people. And yeah, I mean, it's comical now, but the thing of it is they actually slowed down the project.
Well, actually, I've applied this further up to portfolio planning between the company that was there and the company they bought, and then trying to get them both on the same page, and just writing high-level stories and trying to get one company to understand the other company that they bought, the issues, so they could level it out. This is applicable to so many more things than just development. At least, I'm one of those very passionate ones.
So Sutherland was going around a couple of summers ago with a guy from Colorado, and the guy from Colorado had decided he wanted to build sports cars in his garage, and people laughed at him and said that General Motors spends $400 million to come up with a new car from scratch, and this guy used Scrum to do cars, and the last I knew he was still selling the cars. So, you know, now they were very simple cars, like they didn't have doors, you had to sit on the windowsill and swing your legs in. But they were having a ball. There's been little details that I kind of wanted to comment on, but I didn't want to interrupt folks. Sutherland made a big deal a couple of years ago, and I only mention this because it's a global world now. When you're talking about backlogs, you're refining the backlogs. Scrum for years and years and years talked about grooming the backlogs, and the reason they don't say that anymore is because apparently, and this was news to me, in England, when pedophiles are chasing kids, that process is called grooming.
Even here in the States, it's called that.
I had never heard
What
that.
do they call it now? Or they
Refine.
Oh, refine.
Yes, so and it took me a while to break the habit, so I thought I would just mention that.
Grooming
So-
just made so much more sense than, well, refining, I
They
guess.
also dropped the word ceremonies, and now it's events.
Okay.
That was last
Sounds
year.
I learned when it was still pods, now they're teams.
So.
This is a religious connotation there.
So one of the things that, I'm sorry, you said your name when you came in, didn't you?
No, I didn't, Richard.
Okay, Richard. One of the things in your brain at work, which is not a Scrum book, it's about, you know, the guy's a medical doctor, and he was trying to break down how your brain works in layman's terms, so you don't have to know anything about medicine to understand what he's saying. And some of the stuff that is kind of well known anyway, he reiterates it in a work context. He says that if you have a very positive experience, you know, you're very proud of the work you did, that can be a very powerful and motivating thing. But if somebody threatens you and scares you to the core of your existence, that's about 10 times more powerful. And so there are people, and I've worked for them, and probably everybody in here has worked for them, that would literally come in and point fingers and say, if you don't have it done, you're going to get fired, and we find out you're interviewing, we're going to go to everybody you interview with, and we're going to tell them what a bum. Analogic was great for this when the founder was still there. So anyway, the thing of it is there you get into that fight or flight response, and it does make you very focused, but it also gives you tunnel vision.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing creative work and you can only see, you know, in a very narrow way, you're not doing your best work, and that's why having the positive thing, even though it's not as strong an emotion, it allows you to see in a much broader way. That's the reasoning, and that's the kind of things they talk about in your brain at work. The culture game talks about people and corporations and trying to get rid of all the folks that are doing the kinds of stuff that I just described. Some people get more out of it than others, but Mezek, he's actually a Connecticut guy, and he used to run Agile Boston, so he still shows up once in a while.
So do they still have information readers where you can visually see and pick your story and check off which level of done's been done for each story? Do they still do that on each sprint cycle?
Okay, so the thing of it is no, to answer the question.
Those were great.
Well, the thing of it is one of the things that, okay, there's many details that get left out in an hour-long talk, and we're almost 5 minutes before done. So anyway, the definition of ready and the definition of done is a big deal, and you should have those things before you get to here. Okay, and it should be a checklist. Okay, what we as a team have decided is the criteria that our backlog items need to meet before we can actually put them on the backlog to be pulled for work. Okay, the definition of done is a big deal, because in some companies that means you got the unit tests written and you have the documentation done and all the rest of it. In other companies, it just means that it works and you published it to continuous integration and then pass all the tests there. So, you know, having that lets you know where you stand. One of the big things about all of this, and it gets back into the good feeling, is if you Google for the definition of developer happiness, unfortunately, you will get 10 zillion things, okay, and all kinds of nonsense, like the definition of happiness is chocolate ice cream. Well, you know, okay, so does that negate my definition of what my personal likes are, which might be beer instead of chocolate ice cream? So the definition of happiness is, and I always struggle with this, rules that are consistently enforced for everybody, social acceptance, and a way to measure progress. Okay, and the way to measure progress is, are you meeting the definition of done?
What was the second one?
Social acceptance.
No acronym for that? There's an acronym for everything.
Well,
I'm just joking.
Well, the thing of it is I mean, I actually saw some, you know, in my company, I'm actually the Scrum expert and get listed on the kickoff slides that way, because we do defense work, and so if the government wants the project done as Scrum, then they need to show that they've got an expert on staff and that they're complying with the contract. And I have actually seen where people literally said, you know, I mean, really, he wears a white shirt, you know, he is like so socially outcast, it's unbelievable. And they treated these people like crap. And some of the stuff that they did was right out of mean-spirited high school. And, you know, I had to go kind of complain, and of course then it all stopped once I shone a light on it. But the thing of it is it's kind of like little kids in school. If you tell a little kid 10 times that they're a rotten, no good kid and they're never up to any good and they're never going to amount to anything, they will fulfill that role. And we as human beings are all social and all of that. And it's amazing how often that happens in a subtle way. Probably you've seen it more than the rest of us. Mm-hmm. So, you know, these, you know, the things about happiness, that's related to Scrum, because now you're respecting people and you're showing a commitment to people and you're showing focus for the work and not focus for what kind of shirt he wears. I mean, as long as he's covered up, I don't care what he's wearing. So anyway, the last thing that I was going to show, I was going to throw slides at you guys for an hour, and then I thought, if I throw definitions at you, I'm just going to bore you to tears and you won't remember it anyway. But have you guys ever seen a video? It's on YouTube now, it's got 27 million hits. There's a Foo Fighters song called Learn to Fly.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've seen the Rockin' 1000 version of that?
Oh wait, no, I'm thinking of a different song, sorry.
Okay, so basically, so the story behind this is that there's a town in Italy, and these guys wanted the Foo Fighters to come play, and so they picked this song called Learn to Fly, which surprised me.
I have seen that one, yeah.
Yeah, well, it came out.
Foo Fighter, I'm sorry.
Foo
Foo
Fighters
Fighters
band.
rock band.
A what?
It's a rock band.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so anyway, so they decided they were going to play the song and then make a pitch to get the band to come to play.
That was great.
Oh, it was fabulous, because if the 8 of us sat there and played the song and put it on YouTube, it'd be a great big yawn. Nobody would even look at it. You know, you wouldn't get your mother to look at it. It'd be so boring. So these guys got 1,000 people out in a field, and they played the song. And it wasn't some sing-along thing. They actually played and sang the song, and everybody's jumping up and down and having a good time.
Had like 200 drum sets there, and
Well,
a ton of people playing guitar. It was great.
And that was great, because they'd actually looked down the line of guitar players that they'd literally set up in a field, and these guys were nailing it. They were in perfect syncopation. And so the thing of it is they did something that was greater than the sum of the parts, and they had fun doing it. And that's my final message for Scrum, which is, if you're not doing something that's greater than the sum of the parts and you're not having fun doing it and looking forward to it, why bother with Scrum? So that's something to think about as you go out in the world and do Scrum.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I loved at the perspectives I used to cook and bring food. And other people would take turns too.
If you
to
can,
do stuff.
if you can get people to do that, I mean, I personally
That
get
was a
sick.
rule, you had to bring food.
Okay.
That was a
So-
community value, food.
So anyway, so I said that I would stick to 7:30 and my watch at 7:28. So I'm going to say, no, the talk ends here. And so if you want to, go, you can go. If you want to stay and ask questions until you get your question answered, you're welcome to do that. If you want to stay and listen to other people ask questions, you're welcome to do that. If you want to grab a piece of pizza and go, you're welcome to, whatever you like. But that's my talk on Scrum.
Thank
Thank you.
That made it all worth it.
How many companies actually implement it like it's supposed to be implemented now? Like, what's
there-
the curve on it?
Well, the statistics, believe it or not, are they take good Scrum, bad Scrum, and pretend not doing Scrum at all. They're doing it so badly. And it's something like 30%, 30%, and 40%.
So it's still early days for,
Well, yeah, and basically what happens is, and what happened in my company until they got me to go chase people around, is that people would read a chapter in a book and then they'd think they were experts in
Oh.
Scrum, and they'd do, the daily stand-up badly, and within a week, people on the team would be going, why are we doing this? This is a waste of time. So, and the thing that is because you have autonomy and everybody has a say, and you're not just being dictated to and all the rest of it. I mean, if you're on a bad Scrum team, you gotta look at the politics of it, okay? If you're gonna get in trouble, you're gonna lose your job over something silly, I wouldn't say anything, but if you're not happy with Scrum and you feel comfortable enough to say something, I'd say, look, we're not getting any value. We either need to do it right or we need to bail out of this. So, that's something to think about. I mean, most Scrum guys don't say that. It's like Scrum all the time, all the places, but no, I'm like, be pragmatic about it and don't stick to something that's bad just because you want to use words like Scrum and retrospective.
So Scrum's for 5 to 9 people per team, right?
Yes.
So what if you don't have that many people?
Okay, in that case, you're not really doing Scrum. We had a team that had 3 people on it.
So what do you do instead?
Well, there's a couple of things. If you and I were just doing a project, so just the 2 of us, we wouldn't need any mechanism.
Right.
So basically, what I suggest is for really small teams or when you're doing maintenance, use a Kanban board.
Yeah, okay.
Use the what?
Because I just started at a company and there's 4 of us.
Oh, okay.
that's gotta be,
The company's 12
Can you
people,
spell
there's
it?
4 developers.
Yes.
isn't that scary?
I love it. Awesome. I think it's
That's
awesome.
my
I went
definition
from
of fear.
I went from a company of 1,800 people and like 50
Responsibility.
developers to this, and I love this already.
Is it a startup or?
Yeah.
Oh, so you don't have any old code to deal with? or-
No.
Oh, that's,
We're starting
that's
everything.
joy. That's my definition of joy.
Yeah, we're building everything.
That's
So
unfair
four's
in
a
the
good
software
number.
industry though,
Huh?
where
Four's a great number.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
that's 4, yeah. I mean, well, one of them is like a full-time contractor, and there's 3 others that are employees, so, but it's 4 developers right
So who
now.
manages what you do, when you do it, the priority
We're still,
of it?
we're still, we don't know. There's no structure
So
right now.
who's the product owner?
Yeah,
The product owner is the
Who's got the vision for?
the CEO, I guess. I mean, there's, well, actually, there's.
they're not always good product owners. They're the ones with the great idea and money. It's a startup, right?
So if you want to see how a Kanban board works, basically you take Post-it notes, and it would be the whole whiteboard here, I just didn't have enough space. But you take all the tasks and you write them on a Post-it note, and sometimes it's just the task number in your tracking system. But you put it here, and then when I'm ready to work on something, I'll write my name on it so that you don't have to go look it up online, and I'll move it to doing, and when I finish it, I'll move it again to done, and then I'll take the next thing.
Who prioritizes to do?
In a maintenance task like that, you just pick the one you want to work on.
There's a website called Trello board.
Yeah, Trello's that.
Can do
That's the
that
same
really
thing.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the big things that I've kind of cautioned people about, because I've seen it happen, is Rally and a bunch of other software companies make stuff. The Trello stuff is actually good. I've used that too. But some of these things are actually pretty sophisticated, and what happens is people start using the tool thinking that's a substitute for knowing what they're doing. And usually it ends up being a disaster because they start, what people's tendency is to do is to make stuff up and then they get themselves in a.
So how do they refine the stories or understand the stories? Do they still have meetings? Like I've seen the Kanban, that's how they originally.
Well, so the idea, to start Kanban, the only three things you need to have is to visualize, limit, and scope. Now, Kanban's a really deep thing and you can go all day on, the depths of it, but that's how to get started, just visualize, limit, and scope. And so what this means is visualize is have the board, limit means you can only pull one task at a time and you can't pull another task until you finish your last task. And then scope means that whoever put these things up there didn't make them too big.
And who decides what stories are codependent on other stories?
So
So you can't pull this task without doing this task first, or they have to be done at the same time?
Well, Scrum works way better for original development work where you have to worry about stuff like this. This works really well when you're just cleaning things up, doing maintenance, and it doesn't matter what the order is.
But you're in a startup that's developing a new product, right? Or-
Yep.
So, and you're gonna use a Kanban, is there something?
I don't know if we're gonna use one, that's why I asked, but.
I'm a huge evangelist for Scrum, especially for groups like you, because you've got such a risk to manage. It's very easy to go down rabbit holes and get
Right.
lost in terms of where your effort's going, or set unrealistic expectations. Maybe you've got investors or somebody you're trying to court. You need to be able to set a course where you're gonna have what you need to have at some date, or know to cut back your scope, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, and Agile is a great system to do that without a whole bunch of, without having 4 people trying to figure it all out in advance,
Right.
And I'm sure since it's a new product, it's gonna change.
Oh, yeah.
And it's gonna be constantly changing, so for you to try to plan a release for a quarter down the line or something is gonna be hopeless.
Unless you break it down into
Right.
many release cycles, and then you decide what features are the most important features, and then everything else is sort of dependent on that, and that's how you build the chapters, and then the stories, and then the breakdown of the stories, and then what's dependent on what, and how does it flow through to the final release.
Another thing you get is, in the team, everyone's gonna know the product all around.
Right.
You're not gonna have the guy who does the UI who leaves.
Or your code
And
affects a
then-
different part of the
yeah,
product
and
somewhere
you're-
else.
So those things for a small organization, that gives you
Yeah,
the ability to have that shared brilliance with everybody.
yeah. No,
Yeah,
it's,
you're pretty much all on the same page from day one.
I mean, it's tough, because we're all working on different parts of the product. I mean,
Do you work together in a room? Do you ever get together, or are you in?
Yeah, we're all in the same room.
Yeah, so doing
But
that-
there are people doing, it's their instruments, right? So there's people working on low-level C code on the controllers, the motors and all that, the cameras, and then there's the instrument control, the layer that sits on top of that, and then there's the customer-facing UI and all that. So each of us are working on different parts of that layer,
And
So if I'm the UI guy and I leave, they're still screwed, because no one else
So,
is doing that.
Yeah, have you thought about, breaking that boundary of, I'm the UI guy and I don't.
Yeah, there are certain things that we're gonna start going into each other's.
Because, I would look at pair programming.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another great concept.
Yeah.
Just to try to get,
Yeah,
Not
sometimes
one
it seems
person,
like
one
it's
product.
less efficient,
right,
but it can really work.
yeah,
If I was a CEO, and I knew that concept, I would enforce it, because that means if you go, everything goes, you may never have documented a thing.
right, yeah.
And the one thing that you said about the low-level stuff, when you say there's time to review at the end, sometimes you can't review that stuff. It's just a
Right.
switch or a toggle or a setting or this or that.
Yeah,
And that's not something that's always measurable to a visual eye of a stakeholder. That's why sometimes the release cycle may be, 6 weeks long with 3 sprints in the middle that attain to that release cycle, that is something that they can demonstrate visually or executionally to an end stakeholder. Otherwise, they never get the value. And you may have 8 release cycles to get to the final launch. And I don't know what your time frame is on your product, but is
Yeah.
anyone controlling that, or?
Yeah, we're actually gonna be talking about that a lot next week. There's some kind of manufacturing
And nobody likes
agreements.
pair programming program.
Huh?
No, they don't like it at first.
I like it when I need to learn something.
But yeah, what?
I tried to get pair programming going in my prior company, and people weren't going for it, but I think it would be great.
Yeah, and well, what it does too is it takes pressure off of you too.
Right.
You know, you're the guy who knows how to do the low level stuff. And,
Right.
you know, you can't take a vacation and you can't, you know.
Right, yeah.
It's also job security for a lot of people,
Yeah.
they
Well,
don't wanna let go.
Yeah.
Yeah, the plan is to involve, is like in the beginning to kind of get things going, you know, build out the foundational stuff, and then we're gonna start kind of going into each other's territories, you know.
Yeah,
But
and it's-
how we're gonna do that, we haven't figured out yet. We're still kind of specking all that stuff
Yeah,
out.
but everyone always thinks it slows them down. Like everyone always thinks it's best to specialize, you know, oh, I'm the guy who always does this and I can do it faster than everybody else.
Mhm. Right.
That isn't
That's a fallacy, yeah.
Oh, I-
pair programming?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. There's
So-
also
so
something
fair.
called business
Yeah.
value, and I don't know if you ever get to the point where you have to decide whether this feature brings more value than that feature.
Mhm.
There has to be someone with a vision that knows that this feature is gonna give you more business value than that feature, and that's gonna get worked on, and this one's gonna
Right.
get dropped in priority.
So that was actually one of my questions with the numbers. Are you rating the difficulty of that task, or are you rating the importance of that task to complete?
How long it's gonna take you to do that.
Okay.
How
And-
long?
I
and-
come from the world of complexity instead of time. There's two different ways that people look at it.
Okay.
Religious argument over what the way to do it is, but where I come from, it's how complex is it? You set a baseline complexity for a task at the beginning of the project, and you say, you know, this is a 1.
Yeah.
And then everything else is relative to that. And then as you get better, the 1 is something you can accomplish in half a day instead of 3 days or something like that. And you see a change in your team's velocity. And I like that because it's positive feedback.
Now, do you take away 50% of the available time for the sprint to things like admin,
Spikes.
meetings?
Yeah,
spiking?
sometimes we
Well, no,
do
no,
spikes.
like the available time, say there's 10 of us and we only
Well,
have
yeah,
10 hours.
we don't measure time.
Right.
No, but you have the ability to do the project for that sprint, so say you have 10 programmers.
Yeah, if we
8
look
hours
at,
a
if we look
day,
at capacity.
But you only
if-
give 50% of their availability to actually allocate to the stories during that sprint.
It depends on the team and what
And the
our
velocity of the
other
team.
responsibilities are and so forth, but. yeah.
So if everyone's showing a 55 for complexity or difficulty of time, are you gonna adjust the sprint and what you're trying to get done in those 4 weeks, or?
Okay, so what the product owner should be striving for is, you should be able to complete the task in less than half a sprint. And if you have stuff that's bigger than half a sprint, then
You
the
gotta break
product
it
owner
down.
should be breaking it down more.
You spike it.
Well, okay, so spike, there's about 50 different definitions for a Scrum spike if you search for it on the internet. What I think of a spike as is everything you do in Scrum should be directly related to value, something that the user
Right.
is going to use. A spike is something that can't be directly related to giving the customer value, like setting up a server.
Okay,
It's
for us
just
also, a
necessary.
spike is, okay, let's say that.
Overhead cost in a sense.
Yeah, exactly right.
But a spike for us too, say you get to a store, you think you have the understanding, you slot it into sprint 3. You get to sprint 3, you start talking about the story, then you realize, oh, wait a minute, this other team has to do that too, and we really don't know, we'll spike it, we'll give it a spike and a time limit. So we'll give it an hour or 2 hours, we'll have a meeting for that, and we'll spike it, and then we'll decide which way to go, whether that team's gonna do it, we're gonna do it, do they have to finish it before us, so then we'll move the story to another sprint? Or do we need to bring someone else in with a different expertise because it doesn't exist on our team? So, I was a product owner and a Scrum Master, and a lot of the times you have to get, in the stand-up, it's what can I do to get you out of the way, get the problem out of the way so you can move on? So in the morning, we'll have the 15-minute stand-up, and back then it was just, what am I working on, what I work on yesterday, and what's holding me up? And if there's something that's holding you up, then I'll try to remove the roadblock and you move on to something else, so that you're not stuck for half a day flapping around,
I've been there.
right? And it gets really frustrating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we'll either take the story off, we'll spike it, we'll find someone to come help you that day, or we move it to another team, or there's millions of ways for, is that what you do on your?
Yeah, well, first thing we try to do is break a task down. Like
Yeah.
I said, if it's half a sprint, that's way too big. If it's half we try to get stories that you can turn around in a day, if possible. We work out.
And that's
that.
defined also as part of your kickoff, you can decide what's,
Right,
And besides.
and what we look at too is, okay, we've got 5 people on this team, can we do this sprint by swarming on it? Can we get or this story by swarming, can we get 4 people to work simultaneously on this thing? To get the one story out the door, and then move on to the next.
And when you're saying story, are you saying things like, in this example, backgrounds or criminal activity and?
Yeah,
Okay.
the criminal check could be a story that we swarm on, so we get the person to work on the back end at the same time as we get someone.
UI,
Yeah.
and then you got the integration.
Right, and we try to get that all to QA within a day.
now, you also gotta look at, now your team was maintenance, getting it out every hour to 2-hour releases, whereas I was working on a development, like a 6.0 release that had 55 different distinctive animals living in it, if you wanna call it, different types of.
Features or.
Verticals, like where you're hitting healthcare or warehousing or, that kind of thing, or manufacturing. And then that particular program would be used by 3 different verticals, and we also have to worry about that and how does it flow. So you're looking at a bigger timeline, whereas you're looking at short of a timeline. So swarming for us wasn't a way to work on it, a lot of stuff. A lot of the stuff would have to be like broken down into UI, back-end setups, away teams, sending it to an away team for them to work on before we could work on codependency. And each story would be broken down in the grooming session, in the sprint session, but in the grooming session, you get a good idea of the story, make sure it's a sizable chunk. And that it's not gonna be too big, too small for that particular
So-
sprint.
I promised that I would stay, but I just found out from John right before it started that they locked the front door, so once you
Oh,
get
so we all
out, it's
have-
tough to get back in. And I only paid for my parking up through now. So
I found
if
it nice.
people really want me to hang around, I will, but somebody's
My
gotta let
last
me back
time here, I
in.
got a nice $15 parking ticket.
Yeah, and that's
Side
what I'm
street, I didn't
afraid
even know
of.
that.
Yeah,
Right up the street,
there might
there's a
be
lot.
meters there, yeah. Yeah, is it the one right back quarters?
There's meter readers up here.
Jacob's
The one
Technology?
the trade technology?
Yeah,
And the second.
yeah, they're worldwide, actually, they've
Yeah, I
got
got a
60,000
$2 parking.
employees.
There's a sign that says.
But there's 100 in
there.
Nashua.
You do
Defense-
defense
Thank you.
building.
Defense work for them.
Thank you
you're
so, I'm
welcome.
sorry if I was too mouthy.
No,
I'm
that's
so
okay.
passionate about this stuff.
No, it's great
And,
stuff, it's good to
And I
talk
haven't
about.
worked in it for years.